For much of Sunday morning, federal investigators were in and out of Jeffrey Epstein's Upper East Side townhouse. Folks in the neighborhood were shocked but not surprised that the billionaire hedge fund manager had been arrested on federal sex trafficking charges, accused of sexually assaulting teenage girls as young as 14 years old. Many in the neighborhood had heard stories.
Did you see him in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
Tell me where you would see him and what you would think when you saw him.
Getting out of his car right here, because I like to go through this block to go to the park. You know?
So you'd see him getting out of his car all the time?
Oh yeah.
The charges stem from incidents between 2002 and 2005, happening both here in New York and at his home in Palm Beach, Florida, that Epstein would allegedly pay teen girls to give him a massage and then perform sex acts on him. Sources say there were dozens of victims. The teen girls were encouraged to recruit their friends.
It's so despicable. I mean, you know, men in power, they get away with anything they want.
Epstein is already a registered sex offender. His attorney made a controversial plea deal with prosecutors back in 2008 for lesser crimes. Former Miami U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta brokered the deal. He is now labor secretary under President Trump. An attorney representing the victims says in a statement, with this money, Epstein was able to buy more than a decade of delay in facing justice. But fortunately, he wasn't able to postpone justice forever.
Rudabeh, it's hard to believe it's been over a year since we first heard the words and saw the video obtained by the Washington Post that resulted in entertainment reporter Billy Bush getting fired from his job at NBC and Mr. Trump being elected president. The video and audio captures Trump on a hot microphone discussing attractive women and attempting conquest, despite the fact he was already married to his current wife, Melania, at that time 8 months. At one point, Trump described coming on to women and his supposed power of celebrity.
Beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even know where. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the. I can do anything.
At that time, Trump said it was locker room banter and was a private conversation that took place many years ago. He apologized if it offended anyone, but said that the outrage was being overblown. Meantime, reporter Maggie Haberman of the New York Times reported recently that as far back as last January, Mr. Trump, as president-elect, began raising the prospect that it may not have been him on the tape after all. She reported that Trump told a Republican senator that he didn't think it was his voice on the tape. Meantime, in an op-ed published by the New York Times yesterday, Billy Bush wrote this in part: President Trump is currently indulging in some revisionist history, reportedly telling allies, including at least one United States senator, that the voice on the tape is not his. This has hit a raw nerve in me. Bush went on later to say, of course, he had said it, and we laughed along without a single doubt that this was hypothetical hot air from America's highest-rated bloviator. Billy Bush will talk about it all later tonight for the first time publicly with late-night talk show host Stephen Colbert. Now that should be a colorful conversation. Back to you.
Indeed. Thank you, Lisa. And Billy Bush will be on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert tonight. Be sure to tune in at 11:35 right after CBS 4 News tonight at 11.
She was the air hostess on board the notorious Lolita Express, the billionaire's private jet at the center of a sex scandal making lurid headlines across the world. Sleazy Wall Street tycoon Jeffrey Epstein used the Lolita Express to ferry a bevy of beautiful young women, Among the passengers, former President Bill Clinton and Britain's Prince Andrew.
On almost every trip that I did go on, there were young girls around.
In this Inside Edition exclusive, Shantae Davies takes us inside the secret world of the Lolita Express, named for the controversial book and movie about a professor's infatuation with an underage girl. Shantae made several trips on Jeffrey Epstein's infamous Lolita Express. She says she was one of several young, attractive women hired to travel around the world, giving massages or yoga instruction to Epstein and his rich and powerful friends.
Yes, Mr. Dershowitz, bear with me with this long question. So you have a history of defending some very controversial figures like O.J. Simpson, Klaus von Bülow, Mike Tyson, and Jeffrey Epstein. You were Epstein's lawyer when he was under federal investigation for possible sex crimes allegedly involving more than 30 underage girls. He's a man of enormous wealth and very well connected with famous friends like Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. He already had plenty of capable lawyers. What made you say, this is a man I want to defend?
Well, I was the first person that he came to. He had no lawyers at that point. He asked me to defend him. He told me a story that was very different from what ultimately came out. Look, I do half of my cases pro bono. You mentioned some of the prominent people. I defend people on death row without fee. I defend policemen. I defend military people without fee. More than half my cases are without fee, but I don't turn down very controversial cases. Because I was a professor with tenure, I felt I had an obligation to take on the most unpopular cases because I couldn't be fired. And it's a case that was very, very difficult and very, very painful for me because I saw real victims out there. I'm a very strong supporter of the Me Too movement. I think it's very important for men and anybody else to be held accountable for anything they did sexually against a woman. And yet, look, I'm also I hate Nazis. I hate communists. I defended the rights of Nazis to march through Skokie. I defended the rights of communists when I was a student at Brooklyn College. So I'm constantly defending people that I fundamentally disagree with. I'm defending the rights of Donald Trump. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I was a strong supporter for Hillary Clinton. I don't allow my personal interests and values to intrude on my professional life. I think of myself like a doctor or a priest. If they wheel somebody, Jeffrey Epstein, into the emergency ward, the doctor's going to take care of him. If he goes to his rabbi and says, I want to make a confession, the rabbi's going to say, yes, I want to help you.
And I know that about you. You're sort of a true defense attorney in the sense that you defend the rule of law,
right,
as opposed to, you defend the process as opposed to the person. And I prosecuted these kinds of child sex crimes,
and
as you know.
And you prosecuted them very effectively.
Thank
and
you.
You should continue to prosecute them. Sex offenders ought to go to prison.
I agree. But in this case, law enforcement officials had prepared a 53-page federal sex crimes indictment involving 36 underage victims for your client that could have potentially sent him to prison for life.
Right.
But instead, he pled guilty to 2 state charges, not federal charges, involving prostitution. He ended up serving just 13 months in a private wing of a Palm Beach County jail for which he had exit privileges. That's some very fine lawyering on your part, but that's a shockingly light sentence, Professor.
Look, you should complain about the judge and about the prosecutor. Their job is to put people like that in jail for a long time. Our job is to try to get the best possible sentence, the best possible deal we can get, consistent with ethics and law. If you don't want to be doing that, you shouldn't be a criminal defense lawyer. You should be a prosecutor.
But this was all kept from the victims.
And that was
the judge has
not by
the prosecutor, but a federal judge recently ruled that the prosecutors broke the law by failing to inform the victims, and now the Department of Justice is investigating it.
They should be. They should be. Those are very appropriate. The question is, what should a defense attorney do? The defense attorney should do everything in his power or her power to get the best possible deal, and you should then complain about it. That's perfectly appropriate. That's the way the marketplace should operate. But I'm going to continue to try to get the best deal I can.
Well,
I've gotten guilty people acquitted of murder. And that, you know, the system says better 10 guilty go free than 1 innocent be wrongly confined.
Professor,
where I lose sleep at night is if I have an innocent person. And I've had innocent people on death row. And 2 of them came very close to being executed. and I finally saved their lives.
Well, this is where it does get more complicated for you in your personal life, because you're now being sued by one of the women who was involved in that original investigation of Epstein. Virginia Roberts is her name, who claims that Epstein lent her out for sex to some of his friends, including you, when she was underage. You've been very vocal in your denials. Now she's suing you for defamation, saying you're falsely attacking her, trying to intimidate her into silence. You said that you welcome this lawsuit. You want to take it on.
And I also welcome her coming on the show and accusing me face to face. She has never accused me except under the protection of the litigation privilege, because it's completely false. Let me tell you what the evidence is, just very briefly. Oh, well, let me just tell you what the evidence is.
You have to do it quickly.
Yeah, well, she has an email exchange with a journalist in which she admits she didn't have sex with me. She writes a book manuscript in which she says she knew me, she didn't know me, but she didn't have sex with me. She told her best friend she didn't want to accuse me, but she was pressured to do it by her lawyers. There's a tape recording of her own lawyer saying it would be impossible for me to have sex with her, and she was wrong, simply wrong. I have travel records showing that I couldn't have been in any of the places she said she had sex with me. I asked Louis Freeh, the former head of the FBI, to do a thorough investigation. He came to the conclusion that she was making a false accusation. I have been falsely accused. I support the Me Too movement. But when a woman falsely accuses for financial reasons, she was hoping to get $1/3 of $1 billion suing Leslie Wexner, the owner of Victoria's Secret. She also accused him in private after accusing me in public, hoping to get $1/3 of $1 billion. Where do I get that figure from? She told that to her best friend. I have that on tape. So I am welcoming this trial. This is the first opportunity I have to conclusively prove my innocence.
Hold on, you guys, there's a legal.
We can't litigate this because we don't have all of the facts, but we do have a statement that I need to read from Virginia Roberts. She says, no sensible person looks forward to litigation, and I know that standing up for myself and others will cause Mr. Dershowitz and Mr. Epstein to redouble their efforts to destroy me and my reputation, but I can no longer sit by and not respond. As my complaint shows, my abusers have sought to conceal their guilt behind a curtain of lies. My complaint calls for the accounting to which I and their other victims are entitled.
She's right. She's entitled to an accounting, and I have invited the FBI to come to the trial so that they
you want me to give the book away?
Who's telling the truth.
You got to give the book away.
My reputation
Thanks to
is
Alan Dershowitz. We will be right back.